Okay, so we are trying this again. Hi, folks. This is Bill Hannings here with episode 0 of My Little Thing. Me talking about role-playing and other hobbies in my life. Obviously, that's a bit of a placeholder name. I'll come up with a much cooler one once I decide to be cool in later episodes. First off is a creation of my good friend Justin Whitmore's, The World of Tamrin. It's a D&D world he's done homebrew on, welding various pieces he likes from other editions and D&D books to make a very complex cosmological whole. But wait! I've realized, or actually been told by my best friend J.J. Richards, that not everyone knows what D&D is to start. Without getting into the grognardy land of edition wars, Dungeons & Dragons is just what it says. A game where you play high fantasy characters interacting with a fictional world through the adjudication of a dungeon master who animates the NPCs and hazards which they encounter. Justin is our DM/GM, and quite a fine one. He presents the world and its characters to us, describing it and putting challenges, be they battles or puzzles or ethical and moral quandaries, my favorite, in front of us. These get resolved by a mixture of role-playing, which is acting as you would in the case of the fictional character you've created, and dice rolling, to represent the random nature of life and how opposing forces are resolved. I won't get into the weeds on this. There's a bazillion places online that can explain it better than me. But that's the start. Your most common dice are the D20. You also use a D6, D8, D12, D4, D10, and percentile dice, which are also used for adjudication. We don't use a D30. Stop it, you Malkavians. Okay, that's an old person Vampire the Masquerade joke. I had to throw that in there. Justin doesn't just narrate this world, though. He creates it. My adventuring group has all bought minis, and in some cases painted them. And we position them in environments and scenes according to the rules of the game, and our character desires as he interact with the world, be they failed zombies we are fighting, a beautiful full unicorn we are attempting to communicate with, or like another adventuring group that's much more established, that's like the cool kids in school that show up in the tavern and sort of like stare us down because we're like the new kids in town. It adds a great deal to our ability to imagine and interact with the setting, since we can see and touch quite a bit of it. This is, however, a time-consuming process, and it brings him, and us, joy, and I wanted to show my appreciation for his style. Don't worry, other GMs who run for me. I have appreciations of your style as well, and in future episodes, I'll talk about how great your various methods are. So we're beginning where it began for me. Creating a character, specifically Valdis, Dolores, Varr, v. Drakonis. I had a couple of goals in mind when I was starting her as a character. One, I wanted to surprise my fellow tablemates, who mostly know me as playing grim, driven aga heroes who tend to be older, male, and kind of gritty, downtrodden types. 1980s action heroes, gunslingers. Basically, if you could imagine most characters I play, acted by Clint Eastwood, Bruce Willis, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, you get a feel for the type of character I typically field in most role-playing games. I'm something of a stereotype. So I decided to consciously push back against that with the character of Valdis, Dolores v. Drakonis. Now, I wanted to do that without like engaging too many tropes or doing things strangely. And I realized one of the best ways to do that is change the perspective of the character. So I decided to play a woman. I was a little worried about doing this as, like a male cisgender fella. I just felt it would be insensitive if I were to go into that without having like a few of my friends read a sensitivity reading on my backstory, lady friends specifically, and trying to avoid a lot of the things that, some male role-playing gamers can fall into when writing for a female character. This was especially true because I imagine Varr as someone who is a bisexual, and I wanted to write that in a sensitive way, which I'll get into more later. So I ran it by my friend J.J. Richards, who I've mentioned before, and my friend Victoria Orton. I'd like to thank you both for sort of being my sensitivity readers and making sure that the way I wrote my backstory wasn't like weird or sexist. And that was important to me. So Varr. Varr is, let's start with her class. She is a paladin with the Vengeance Oath. Now, I haven't played 5th edition before. Weird, right? I'm a constant gamer. But as I said, I've been very much avoiding the Grognardi edition wars. And the last time I played D&D was 3.5. I avoided 4 entirely and played Pathfinder instead. So there I am. I'm talking to Justin, and he says, this is going to be sort of a more roguish, possibly evil aligned or neutral aligned group. It's not going to fit a typical good guy character. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Like, I typically play like some sort of good guy character, most often a melee specialist, either like a paladin or a fighter when I'm doing D&D. Especially when I'm learning a new edition, I found that doing a melee type tends to lend itself towards me sort of getting a feel for the rules a lot quicker than if I'm like throwing myself in the deep end as a caster. So let's talk a bit about the magic of World of Tamrin as well, because that's important to the way that I work Varr. The most common sort of magic is wizardry. It's fairly well understood. People know how wizards cast spells, and it's very stratified and organized, followed by like sorcery. Warlocks are less understood. Druids are pretty strange, but clerics and paladins are very out there because in this setting the gods are not terribly interactive. This isn't like Faerun or like in Forgotten Realms where you'll see a god walking around, or you might have spent a night with a god the night before in the bar, and that's just a thing that happens. Thanks a lot, Ed Greenwood. Anyway, so that's not really a thing. So clerics are really weird because they're full divine casters, and paladins are even more strange because they're almost sort of representatives of a concept. So that was interesting. And so a paladin of vengeance appealed to me. One of my favorite characters in literature is the Count of Monte Cristo. And so I took the idea of, wanting something back and being betrayed, or in Varr's case, actually, my initial character concept for her was that she had lost her family lands and money through her own addiction to gambling, which is still an issue for the character. And I enjoy playing up the fact that she has a massive flaw and does have issues with the gambling addiction and will spend and risk more money than she should on it all the time. So that's a thing. But Justin suggested a better idea for me, which would dovetail into his plot, was that Varr, yes, is a drinker and a gambler, but what actually got her cast out of her home kingdom, or rather her home empire of Starmouth, was that she was betrayed and framed as having taken slaves and having them turned into undead, which is considered a massive, massive, massive crime in the Starmouth Imperium. I should clarify about Starmouth itself. It is a very complex society with a heavy necromantic presence in terms of aesthetic. Although this is somewhat tongue-in-cheek description, it is not incorrect. Justin has spoken of it as Varr's from Halloween Town. That's not wrong, and it definitely comes across in her aesthetic, which is all blacks and reds and being spooky. Like, that is just how she is. Despite the goodness in her heart, she just naturally comes across as an intimidating, imposing person, and constantly wears a mask over her helm, spends money on a special cloak, which has no in-game effect other than blowing dramatically, and a helm which glows spooky red eyes. And these don't give her any mechanical bonuses, but they look cool. And Varr is a very extra person and cares a lot about looking impressive at all times. Despite her somewhat reduced circumstances, she still has the backstory trait of being a noble and still acts like one, and in fact treats one of the other party members who happens to be from Starmouth like a peasant or a servant at times. But that's a complex emotional connection, which I will talk about when I speak about him, which is not tonight. I'm just trying to sort of explain her. So when I create a character, I always sort of ask a question. Every character, there's a question that's central to every character. Now with Varr, the question isn't about vengeance. The story of vengeance, that is her reason for being, but it isn't the question she's intended to answer. The question that Varr is about answering is related to the theme of the game itself, which is a lot about politics and privilege. That's something that Justin established very early on that he wanted to discuss while playing D&D. You know, we often think of D&D as sort of the game where you go into dungeons, fight goblins, and take their money, which, fair enough, you know, we do that. That is a thing that sometimes happens. But Justin has really written the game and the role play of it to sort of reflect that, like, you know, privilege can be misused, power can be misused, and our characters are defined very much by how they respond to that. And the concept for Varr was that she is a person who came from a high position of privilege, who has some fairly like incorrect beliefs about how people are and, you know, what people's place in society should be, and her sort of learning that she's from a terrible place and has been something of a terrible person, and how she reacts and becomes a better one. That's sort of the question is, you know, how does someone who started in a bad spot, believing in bad things, become better? And her question and her journey is about becoming this better person, about acquiring compassion and understanding for other people. The first PCs that this happened with, because it was an NPC first, which I will eventually discuss because it's in her backstory. The first two PCs were the warlock duo of Trouble and Mischief, played by Alice Bryson, and Crystal Reed, although I believe Mischief is played by Alice and Trouble is played by Crystal. So I got that wrong when I spoke about them, but they're twins, so it's not my fault. And besides, I named them that as Varr. They haven't given their actual names to anyone quite yet. Oh, actually, that's not true. I believe one PC has had Trouble's actual name, but I'm not certain. But she has sort of become an affectionate older sister who buys them nice things and treats them with more consideration than even other party members who she all generally has a cordial relationship with. The sort of defining moment when Varr changed from just being sort of an arrogant person concerned with her own vengeance was the point at which she was brought to the temple of her god. Now, in D&D, specifically in the World of Tamrin setting, all the paladins have to choose a god. In her case, sort of through happenstance and guided roleplay with Justin, she came to Avandra, who is the god of, like, rebellion, luck, and freedom, which may seem like an odd fit for Varr, but is actually perfect. Thematically, I intend for her sort of become the knight of rebellion and turn away from the corrupt practices of the Starmouth Imperium and push back against the corrupt society of Asimia, where she's presently living, and sort of become a focal point of striking back against injustice in the world. That is where I want to go with her. So thematically, a god that's about breaking chains. This is very much what I wanted to do with her. So there's that. Other things about writing Varr that I think are important were I wanted to give her a fairly complex, like, story beyond, like, hey, I'm in this town, I'm in this bar, going to make money and stuff. So I put thought into how she looked, how she carried herself, which is why for the first gaming session, until she actually learned to trust the other PCs a little bit, she actually masqueraded as a dude briefly, because, like, she's wearing full plate armor, and I consciously lowered my voice even below the register I'm using right now, and, you know, sort of actively made it sound like I was, you know, someone putting on a voice so that they understood that Varr was kind of trying to be actively more intimidating than her already impressive figure is. When I say figure, like, she's this powerfully built person in heavy armor with like a spooky helmet that's like glowing red. So obviously she's got some scary factor. But at one point, even Justin, one of Justin's NPCs, a unicorn, said to her like, the face you wear for the outside world and the heart you have inside are so utterly different. Why do you choose to be this deceptive? And a lot of that's actually quite cultural. In Starmouth, I'm going to consult the book for a minute here, but it's only a lie. It's only a lie if no one can sort of if someone can dispute that it's not the truth. So like lies are not considered a big deal in her society if no one can call you out on them. So she plays the role of the scary person so that her acts of kindness are all, sort of take people by surprise. And it sort of shields her against people taking her lightly. They're sort of like, yes, the scary warrior is here. I should listen to what they say, or sort of give them a wide berth so she doesn't have to worry about, her what she perceives as weakness. So the big thing about Varr was, in order to establish this internal life that's very different from our external point of view, I chose to write letters home to her family. Now, her family's interesting. I wrote them all in the Starmouth Imperium, in the noble houses. Typically, you marry for political reasons, so I consciously wrote her parents as a love match, which had political consequences, which Justin explained to me, which is that they were actually asked to effectively retire early, and Varr was in a position to take over the family, which that set her up for her downfall. But she loves them very much. They're now sort of in reduced circumstances, a little cottage outside of their old estate, which was like this like spooky mansion on moors right next to an actual dinosaur ranch, because people in Starmouth don't ride horses. They ride basically velociraptors into battle, because it's just that extra a nation. And it's been so fun to play up the fact that she doesn't like horses. She wants to ride a cool violent lizard like she did at home. And she misses her not pony very much. But as I said, she writes her family. Occasionally she sends them money. She also has a younger brother and a sister. As Starmouth is a necromantic society, I thought it would be appropriate for her brother to be a necromancer and her sister to be a bard. So all of them are characters who she's had a history with. She writes letters primarily to the family, but always remembers to speak about them as well, sort of inquire how their education is going because they're younger. She's at 22. Now, because I set her at 22, I also realized that in her time of life, she's probably had relationships. And I feel like a large part of characterization and writing even like a D&D character is like, what sort of romantic life have they had? And in Varr's case, I had pegged her very early on as a bisexual. And I realized also that she's somewhat overbearing as an individual, and that probably that relationship ended not tragically, but sadly, because it flamed out because her partner was like, I'm sort of done with your bullshit, and called her out and left her. And that was fine. And I thought that was really interesting to like write someone's, who's like, who misses their partner. And it's, not like, it was this vast tragedy. Oh, they were slain and now I must take revenge. It's like, no, they left me because I was an asshole and I missed them and I learned a lot from them. And I thought that was really cool. So I've actually sort of included a bit on Varr's ex in her story. Every now and then in her characterization, she's trying to write a letter to her ex, not to like be like, come back, but like, hey, we left on not great terms and I want to apologize. Like that's part of Varr realizing that she was kind of a trash fire of a human being and is trying to make, herself better while she's fighting to make the world better. And I really think that's a fun sort of dynamic of, wow, I really screwed up. I should fix it. And I'm sort of playing with that and having fun with that. And I also am trying to write, someone who is bisexual. She presently has a crush on a boy. I won't say who, because, that would be telling. but you know, she has feelings, and she has feelings for both sexes, and she, you know, she's a person with, you know, needs and wants, and has made mistakes. It was just really also fun for me to think of and think about how a society that's like very heavy on surveillance and sort of like a very oppressive culture would, you know, how someone would fall in love with that. And I thought it would be funny if she fell in love with a classmate who was like looking at her a lot, and she's like, it's a spy. It's one of the secret police. So she like confronts her classmate who's been staring at her for a week. And actually she's like, well, why are you always looking at me? And the answer is, well, I thought your eyes were really pretty. And I sort of, you know, wrote the love story from there because I think it's really cute. But I just, you know, like the idea that, you know, she, you know, sort of her own directness and domineering aspect, which were initially like an attractor in the relationship, also sort of hurt her in the end. So she's, you know, she's dealing with her own issues. And I like sort of that aspect about a character. I like to write people that aren't like just paragons of like good or just complete mustache twirling villains. I think I want Varr to be complex and sort of slowly arc towards being a better person and dealing with her own shit, like her addiction to gambling, or, you know, her own sort of bossiness. Well, I don't mean bossy, that's not the right word. And she can steamroll other people's thoughts pretty easily. She's not terribly considerate, even if she's kind. So a lot of her kindness is sort of retrospective after she's screwed up. But I'm sort of teaching a character who statistically has very low wisdom to be more wise. So that's kind of a fun deal. So that's Varr, and that's your introduction, as partial as it is, to the World of Tamrin. I hope I get more listeners and watchers. I'm going to talk about this more in the future. I apologize for the occasional sniffing. I have a little bit of a cold or an allergic reaction right now. This was a great sort of session 0 to talk about everything. Probably talk about another role-playing character next. It might be more World of Tamrin content. I'm not sure yet. I'm also going to be talking about books that I like in the future, so look forward to that. And I will also be covering reenacting, so please, you know, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful time. Know that I care about every single person who watches this, and that, you know, I want you to be entertained by this, and I want to talk about this sort of the meta considerations of role-playing. I may, in the future, rather than talking about a specific character, just talk about how we approach role-playing as a game and as a craft, and how we can sort of play to bring joy to others as well as ourselves, and explore themes beyond, you know, fight orc, kill orc, take his pie. Have a great night. Bye.